This week's episode of Permadeath Weekly brought to you by Volantis Academy Podcast School. Everyone's got one, and now you can too. Fly higher on the net than ever before by enrolling in our 2 or 4 year programs to help with things like securing ad reads, proper mic etiquette, getting to tell people at parties that you make content, and what would a podcast degree be without the possibility of entering the true crime genre. With your degree, you will also receive honorary access to a small town of your choosing's police records. So whether you're ready to enroll today or simply would like to know more, visit volantisacademy.edu and enter code PERMAWEEKLY to receive a free 1-month look at the Volantis Academy Learners Database, offering you glimpses at real lesson plans and access to a large database of student projects. So, what are you waiting for? Press record and fly high with Volantis. So the reason Volantis is sponsoring our show this week is I'm a part of their 2-year program, and one of our midsummer events is they take one of the shows that we're working on, our professor does, and takes it with them to a summit and gets live focus testing feedback for the show and sends us the audio recordings of that so we can listen to it and have some takeaways from that. And it's helpful because, you know, it's feedback from people who don't know the shows, who don't know us, who aren't part of the program. You know, it's a nice way to get feedback from people outside of our circle, you know, and the circle of people who, you know, the small group who listen online, who know me, who know the show. So I'm really curious what outsiders think of this. You know, whether they be people who even know about video games or people who know what I'm trying to do here. So I thought it would be fun to listen to those live on the show and, you know, really make a thing of it. So I'm going to go ahead, and I have not listened to these. I'm going to listen to the first one and see what we got.
That's it? It's supposed to be just him? Nobody else? There's nobody else on the show. He sounds lonely.
Oh, okay. You know, honest. You know, I maybe expected something like that. Let's check out the next one.
Billy, it's your mother. I need you to stop wasting all that money on stupid podcast school. Why can't you be more like your brother?
Oh dear. Theme song. Welcome, everybody, to Permadeath Weekly. I am your host, Bill Conway. This week's track of the week is the title theme from the RoboCop Game Boy game, composed by Jonathan Dunn. My awareness of this track came from Kyle Bosman of Easy Allies mentioned in a Q&A that this song would blow you away, and it has no business being this good for a licensed RoboCop Game Boy game. And yeah, I listened to it and immediately felt that I need to make this track of the week. This is way too good for its own for what it is. Yeah, no other relevance beyond that. So welcome, everybody. It's probably very freaking hot where you're at right now, unless you're listening in somewhere that has a colder climate. If you were listening I would love to know who listens to this show. Now, I don't have a massive outreach. You know what I mean? Like some podcasts who have millions of listeners, it's like, man, you know, imagine counting those heads and being like, wow, where does listener 870,000 live? You know, like, are they in an igloo somewhere? Because that's where I was just about to go. It's like, oh man, do these, you know, what if I have a listener who does live in a cold climate, who is like studying penguins or something? I don't want to immediately dismiss that maybe some of my viewers are that intelligent that they're biologists like that, and they're out there studying penguins and patterns and whatever people do in igloos, or Arctic-like structures. But I hope if it is hot where you're at, you're cooling off listening to some Permadeath Weekly. If you're listening to it at work, fucking stop what you're doing and listen to the show. Full attention right now. because I need your full attention, because I'm going to tell you I am extremely apathetic about the news that, over the last week. Not much has really happened that I really want to discuss in the world of video games. The big things this week, and this weekend have been the Comic-Con trailer reveals. We got a whole bunch of MCU stuff. In their plans for like Phase 4, new shows, new movies. We got trailers for like Walking Dead and Westworld and Watchmen and all that stuff. And all that stuff is great. I'm looking forward to a lot of that stuff. This is like the E3 for people who watch TV and movies. So, but I don't really cover that stuff as often. And, they're just trailers for the most part. I don't really have thoughts, on these things. So like, that's kind of like the biggest stuff that's happening. But we did get, in the midst of all of this Comic-Con trailer goodness, we did get a trailer for The Witcher on Netflix, which, has had its ups and downs throughout its development. And by ups and downs, I mean, in terms of what fans think about it. We had that initial reveal, Henry's, is it Cavill? Saville? How the hell do you say that guy's name? It's Cavill? Is it Cavill? I have no assistant here. I don't know who I'm referring to. Is it Cavill? We'll just say Henry. We had the news of Henry's casting, who, if you don't know who that is, he plays Superman in Man of Steel and Batman v Superman. I don't know anything about Justice League. Was he in there? Again, I'm looking off to the side as if someone's going to answer me. No response. But news of his casting, and, people, wondering if he could do it, if he could pull it off. Then Netflix put out that little, like, costume test thing, that little clip that was on Twitter of, like, Henry walking up to the camera in the Geralt wig and the armor, like, just guzzling down a potion. And it just looked very Spirit Halloween. He wasn't given the full makeup department treatment yet. You could tell it was a wig. I mean, you could tell it's a wig anyway, because nobody has hair like this. Nobody looks like this. But it was super noticeable it was a wig. Like, it looked like he showed up at your uncle's Halloween party. And, like, what's in that vial, Henry? Like, it's not a potion. What is it? What'd you bring? So there was that. And then there were some screenshots of some armor that some people thought looked doofy. But we got the full trailer, man. And you know what? I have no real, like, horse in this race. I've never played or beaten a Witcher game. I have no attachment to the series, really. So I could have went either way on this one, but the cool thing is these are based on the books, like directly adapting the books, not so much the games. The games have taken some liberties from what I understand with, Geralt's, weaponry and the way that certain characters are, or where they are in the story, and some of the, like the Witcher medallion, is another thing that they changed up in the games to make it look a little more, striking, excuse me, and not just a coin on a necklace. So this is adapting the books. Man, I think it looks good. I think they're doing a good job on it. And one of the first things I saw online was, talking how, oh man, it looks cheap, or it looks cheap compared to Game of Thrones. Because Game of Thrones is going to be like that in terms of visuals anyway. I'm not going to say, a high bar for the writing, because more than half the show kind of fell off. But Game of Thrones kind of set that high bar visually for fantasy shows. Costume design, set design, in the latter half of the show, the CGI in a lot of instances was just, a top of its class. So it's natural, I guess, for some people who have spent so many hours watching Game of Thrones to look at another fantasy show and be like, it doesn't look as good as the other one. And it's like, I mean, you kind of need to give yourself a little perspective here too, is like, Game of Thrones had the budget of like 1,000 Suns, leading up to its big moments. And, HBO threw the fucking kitchen sink at that thing, and it paid off visually. It looked spectacular. This is the first season of The Witcher. We have no clue if it's going to be a success. Netflix has no clue if it's going to be a success. I think for whatever its budget is, I think it looks good. Like, you compare this thing to like any other fantasy show besides Game of Thrones, and it's about par of the course, if not better in a lot of instances. There's some really neat shots in this trailer. Not even having to do with just the CGI of the monsters or whatever, costume design, whatever it might be, that I think are actually pretty impressive. And I think far exceed the expectations I had for it. And from what I'm seeing online, there's a lot of people who are pretty pleased with this. Like, there is really no like fan blowback at all about this trailer, which is really affirming to see. And I bet that's a big relief for the showrunners and Netflix to put this trailer out and be like, "See, we did it." You know, don't take a costume test for 13 seconds on Twitter as the banner for how this show's gonna turn out. Always wait for the final product on everything. You know, I think it's important. You know, especially with video games. You know, you see like alpha footage or like early dev footage of something and be like, I don't know, this thing's gonna turn out pretty smelly. But it's like, man, the things early in development don't have the spit shine of the stuff that you're seeing in the trailers eventually. So, I'm happy they're seemingly pulling this off. I mean, we'll see what the full product is like when it's in our hands. I don't know if there's a date for this. There wasn't a date at the end of the trailer, as far as I know. So, yeah. So check that out if you haven't. I think they're doing a pretty good job. Other things, to talk about this week. I want to talk about the Overwatch changes, and I apologize for anyone who doesn't really care about Overwatch. But they're doing a pretty big shakeup to the game's formula. Probably the biggest since they took away no limits from quick play and just the whole game in general. Where back when Overwatch launched, you could have as many of the same hero on a team as you want. And, people were doing shit like 6 Torbjorns or, like 3 Torbjorns and 3 Bastions and just playing really annoying shit that was like, it's fun in a way. It's like, okay, yeah, the game allows it. Let's just see what happens, and theoretically you shouldn't be able to win games like that, against a well put together composition, but it was just bogging down a lot of lobbies. So they made it so that you can only have, one instance of a character per team, which I thought was a fantastic change, necessary change, made me enjoy the game 1,000 times more. And this time around, they are looking to balance out the amount of each role that are on your team. So it's going to be a role limit. So each team now will consist of 2 damage dealers, 2 tanks, and 2 support. Having an even spiel. Is that the right word? Spiel? What's an even spiel? Again, looked off screen waiting for an answer, didn't get one. But this way you have a nice even coating of mayonnaise across your slice of bread. Instead of like, well, you missed a spot and it's some guy in the corner shooting his Hanzo arrows into the sky as you need a support. But they aren't just limiting the amount of roles per team, they're adding a role queue, which allows you to pick a role that you want to play before queuing up. So you won't have instances of like, oh man, this sucks. You can only have 2 damage, 2 tank, 2 support. I better pick what I want to play very fast before, those roles are all taken. They're making it so like, oh man, today I'm really in the mood to play, damage, or I'm really in the mood to play, I really want a tank today. But people just always seem to pick tank before I could pick it. You could go in and before you queue up, pick tank, pick support, pick damage dealer, whichever one you want, and presumably, if everything works out okay, have a guaranteed slot as one of those roles, which, gets rid of, because it happens even in quick play. And I mean, in quick play, you just don't take it seriously. I don't take it seriously when people yell at me to switch. I get you still want to win. It's part of the game. But like, dude, if you're blowing a gasket over quick play, reel it in, step back, take a look at everything, evaluate the files. But this alleviates that aspect of the game, especially in comp, where you can go in and be like, you know what, I just want to play damage today, but every time I get into whatever tier I'm in, I can never play what I want to play without getting flamed for it, or whatever role I want to play. This allows you to queue up for competitive play just as damage dealer. You're going to be playing DPS. You're going to play whatever you're good at, whatever role you're best at, because sometimes it sucks to have to get flexed into a position that you suck at. And I know it's like, you should really get good at everything, but it's like, that's just not unrealistic. There's ever expanding roster of heroes, in each role. I have no time to master them all. Some of them I'm much better at than others. Some of them I play just fine. I think somebody who's really good at support should queue up and just play support. And typically people who just play support usually have no trouble just playing whatever support character they want to play. But this juicens up the meta a bit and gets rid of a lot of the stale stuff that's been around in the Overwatch League and just around the competitive scene in general. So, I think it's a pretty positive change. I think it's something that we have to obviously, it remains to be seen how it will work in practice. Jeff Kaplan from the Overwatch team, expressed in his developers update, that one thing they're keeping their eye on and one thing that will be a potential point of contention are queue times. We see this in MMOs all the time. I mean, Jeff Kaplan knows more than anybody. Working at Blizzard, working on WoW. when you want to queue up for a dungeon in these games, DPS queue times are always so much longer than tank or healer queue times because there's simply more people wanting to just deal damage than worry about the important stuff like tanking and positioning and healing. So that's a potential issue in Overwatch. They look to be doing a similar thing that they do in Final Fantasy XIV, and I don't know if it's in WoW at this point. I haven't tanked or healed in WoW in ages. But offering rewards for people entering in as tank or healer to kind of incentivize playing one of those roles, which will, quicken queue times or try to balance those out around the board. So get more people out of the damage queues into those other queues. So, this is something that sounds like a change that would typically hit competitive only, but it's coming to quick play and competitive. So it puts it about on board with, the no limit gameplay changes from way back in the day of, wow, they're really shaking up the entire structure of how you enter a match. And there are people with legitimate concerns, of like, as quick play, I don't really know if you should really, enforce these kinds of things in a mode that is mostly for having fun, in terms of the game's rule set. But I also look at quick play as, like, that's the unranked mode that you're playing within the current rule set of competitive Overwatch. Like, there's the arcade for fun stuff. And typically, the arcade's an interesting system because some modes have long queues in arcade. Some modes people just don't play in there. But it's a really popular set of modes for events because of loot boxes and whatnot. So what they're doing is they're not getting rid of the current quick play rule set. They're adding, I believe it'll be a permanent edition, quick play classic into the arcade. So within the current rule set of Overwatch, you'll be able to earn loot boxes, which the more I think about, the more I think is not a bad idea. I was initially like, maybe you should just put quick play classic on the main menu next to quick play, to kind of still embolden its importance as this is a part of Overwatch's, legacy. This has been the quick play rules for years. Let's go ahead and put it front and center, but being able to earn loot boxes in a mode that you have more control over, that isn't mystery heroes, that isn't some fucking duel mode or whatever, I think is pretty encouraging. It's better than no limits, so I think it's a good idea. So it'll be interesting to see how it shakes out, how people will take to it within the quick play community, and the competitive community. Me personally, I'm kind of like excited for it overall. I think it really kind of, it kind of gets rid of a lot of community muck. And also just makes me excited to be able to queue up for something that I think, that I think I'm good at, which will get me maybe to play more competitive, because they also now have separate competitive ratings for each role. So if I just suck at tanking, suck at healing, I never have to play them ever again, and I can be judged on the season solely on what I'm good at. And I think that will only improve teams overall, I think. Assuming, the people who get picked for damage or the people who get picked for support pick the heroes that they're actually, good at, or heroes that are effective. But again, that's a thing for the meta to shake itself out, on the back porch as we go along. But again, positive changes, I think. Kind of looking forward to that. And kind of freshens it up a bit for me, which leads me to the next thing I want to talk about. And that is Final Fantasy XIV Shadowbringers. So last week I had, a song from this as my track of the week. And at that moment, I still am enjoying the game, enjoying the expansion. But as I'm playing it, I have a lot of things I'm playing right now. Like, I'm still obsessed with Teamfight Tactics, probably more than I was last week. I'm still working on Mario Maker 2 level. I'm still playing through Yakuza 5. I want to check out Fire Emblem this week, and I have a lot of stuff that's, sensory overload. Just bop, 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 just getting punched in the face by 1,000 different things. And I've been also working my way through Shadowbringers, and I'm loving it. I'm loving the story. And I just kind of wish, and I'm trying to be careful with this because I don't think the game's doing anything wrong. Because, right now the game is in its highest, subscriber state ever. It's the highest reviewed expansion, one of the highest reviewed Final Fantasy games, Shadowbringers is in a long, long, long time. It's being highly praised. And for good reason. the story, it is, years and years of payoff in the making for fans of this game. Tons of lore reveals and just tons of just nice stuff on a plate. You want to eat it? But the one thing that they never do is they never really change up the template for making your way through an expansion pack. And as I'm playing it, as I'm making my way to level 80 and making my way through this story, I'm finding that the main thing that I'm playing this for right now is the story, because ever since Heaven's Ward, the whole idea has been, here's your story, here's the new zones, explore these new zones, do the very boring side quests whenever you get level gated by the story. Oh, you need to be level 70 whatever to finish, to accept the next story quest. Fate grind, do a dungeon, do some crappy side quests, which are still so bad to this day and age. I mean, it's an MMO fetch quest. I mean, whatever. And then run around the zone and collect the ether current so you could fly. There's never been like an extra layer of systems added on to the leveling process of Final Fantasy XIV. And again, like I said before, I want to be careful with this because the game is doing something that, I think is working for it. We have instances like World of Warcraft where every expansion in Blizzard will add some shit to the game that either works out or doesn't work out. But it's always some new gimmick to the leveling process. And usually, no matter how the expansions end up turning out, I always have a blast leveling through a World of Warcraft expansion. Whether it be world quests or just like new mechanics, new meta progression things like class halls or just whatever it might be, artifact weapons, whatever. There's always something new to kind of poke around in. Something associated with that expansion story, something associated with that expansion's theme, that gives you a sense of newness to it. And so far, as I'm playing through Shadowbringers and I'm like, kind of like getting bored of the gameplay loop of it. And I feel bad because Blizzard takes risks like that. And usually at the end of the day, they usually never pay off in the long term. But I just kind of wish 14 would add something like that to its leveling experience to make it not feel like I'm just playing the same expansion over the last 6 years, just with a different story on top of it. They always knock their dungeon fights out of the park, their primal fights out of the park. Their raid design is really nice. But and they do add a lot of little side content, usually after the fact of an expansion being out. But there's never anything wholly new to poke at throughout the leveling process. Square is not afraid to experiment with stuff like Deep Dungeon and Eureka, Golden Saucer type stuff. But man, I would love what's one big new feature for the expansion for these new zones? What is this one thing that's, cause when Heaven's Ward came out, it was the ether currents, it was flying, and then hunts and stuff. But ever since then, man, I'm just kind of playing the same goddamn gameplay loop. And I mean, it's an MMO, it's the same video game. I shouldn't expect massive changes. They want to try to keep everything unified. You're always going back to old zones and old content. So I maybe understand their philosophy. But I'm actually wondering if I'm even going to make it to the end of Shadowbringers because I turn it on and I play it for an hour and I get bored and I turn it off. And, I'm making my way through the story bit by bit, and I think that's fantastic, and I'm loving it. And I don't want to criticize the game for not adding these things, because it's selfish. Oh, you should add the things I want, like the other MMOs. Because, 14 fans love what they're getting. I love the game. It's working for it. Why change something? This is a game that has had a history of being broken in the past. Why risk fucking something up that is running on such a high? But I think about the Overwatch changes that happened, so many years after release, and I'm like, man, that really shakes things up a bit. You're not just playing the same game anymore, and I don't want changes for change's sake, but I think those Overwatch changes are changes for the good of the game. And I would love to see oh man, change some things about the leveling process, maybe don't make me have to get these goddamn green blobs so I can fly in your zone anymore. Make a different mechanic for it, or add this type of progression, do something that adds a little more flavor to the gameplay aspect of 70 to 80 of Shadowbringers, or whatever expansion you have going forward. That's what I would like to see. So I'm wondering, and holding out, let's see how I fall, on finishing Shadowbringers. But if you haven't gotten Shadowbringers and you're curious if you should, and you really love the template of every other Final Fantasy XIV expansion, I think you'll like Shadowbringers. So yeah, man, again, like I said, no news I really want to talk about. I do want to say this. I have a game recommendation for you all. For all you Switch owners out there, or maybe people who just don't know about this game, it's been out on PC and PS4 for a little while. I love Super Mega Baseball. Super Mega Baseball 2 is coming out to the Switch. on July 25th on Thursday with its like complete edition with all of its DLC and stuff. This is like, honestly, like this series is my favorite baseball series. I love the show, like MLB The Show. I love playing the Road to the Show modes in that. But I think we're really missing, there's a large void missing from our sports video game lives. And that's in the form of like arcade sports games. We've seen attempts at it with like NBA playgrounds and shit like that. But we don't really get them often, if at all. You know, like I miss the days of like Blitz and Slugfest, and not even necessarily licensed stuff, which is the strength of Super Mega Baseball. Is this is not a Major League Baseball game. This is a game wholly in its own universe, super cartoony, super goofy, but has a really fantastic franchise mode, you know, with so many nice features and a lot of depth to it. And just the gameplay itself, super arcadey, super fun. If you like baseball, I highly recommend checking this out on Switch if you haven't. It's also getting a price drop. The base version is getting a price drop on PC and PS4 on the same day. And its complete edition will be available on those respective platforms as well. My plea to this developer, is it Metalhead? I think it's Metalhead. Make a football game, an American football game, please. Please, I don't want to play Madden anymore. Make a football game with a fucking franchise mode like this, with the player depth and the customization of teams and cities and names and colors and uniforms and players. Please make a football game. If you're listening to this, please make a football game. Please, God, Super Mega Football, make it happen. Or a hockey game. I don't care. Just make more games. I love this series. I truly think it's one of the best baseball franchises on the market right now. And especially if you're playing on PC, there's no other fucking options because Sony has it locked down with the show. So please buy this game. Please play baseball. Hit a home run. You know, knock it out of the park. Just like this show. Knock it out of the show like Permadeath Weekly does every single week. I hope you enjoyed this week's episode of the show. Again, not much news to talk about, just Overwatch changes, my thoughts further on Final Fantasy XIV Shadowbringers. Obvious things, in the entertainment news this week, such as, Kyoto Animation's tragedy. And those are things that I don't feel qualified to really touch on or comment on, besides just, you know, it's some of the most hollow news you could ever wake up to read. And, I'm sure you know how anybody who cares about anime or whatever feels about that situation, and it's devastating, and it's probably the worst thing that's ever happened to the industry. And I hope those families recover from this. I can't even imagine. I really, truly can't. I am genuinely so sick of people just dying, living their lives in all around the world, man. You know, it's so sickening. You know, just the instance that people just can lose what they have. You know, young lives with ambitions and dreams and talents and family. And it's enraging, man. It's an infuriating tragedy as it is a sad one. You know, if you don't know, read up on that. Just search up Kyoto Animation if you don't know about what happened. This has been Permadeath Weekly for the week of July 22nd. If you enjoyed the show, let me know in the comments down below. Leave a comment, leave an email, permadeathpodcast@gmail.com. You can also find us on Twitter @permapodcast. You can leave us questions there, or in our email, or on our Discord, which you can find a link to down below in the description if you're listening on YouTube. If you're not listening on YouTube, seek me out. Get a link to the Discord. It's very easy to do. Join us in there. We chat, we talk, we cry, we leave questions. Most importantly, there's a channel in the Discord specifically for podcast questions as well as Mario Maker 2 levels. Check those out. Not much activity in there besides levels from Kinross and I, but it's a good place to go, hang out. Want to talk about game design with the masters, me and Kinross? Look out, Miyamoto. Permadeath Podcast is coming for you. It's time to unseat the king, and we run Nintendo now. We make the games. Mario 64 2. Get all the stars. Get all the stars and meet all of the fans at the fan convention. Mario 64 2 taking place at Comic-Con. Meet all the stars like Jeffrey Dean Morgan and Kit Harington. Collect all stars like Jordan Peele. And I'll go to Comic-Con and have your Mario 64 2 panel where you can answer all the questions at the Q&A.